Part 1. The massive council room was filled with noise. Hundreds of alien voices spoke at once, and translator machines worked hard to make sense of it all. Daniel Carter stood at the speaking platform, his hands gripping the edges tightly. He was the human ambassador, and today was not going well. The purple-scaled alien from the Vexari species was talking about humans again. His voice came through the translator with clear disgust. He called humans primitive. He said they were like children who didn't understand the real galaxy. He said humans had no right to ask for a better position in the council. Laughter filled the room. It wasn't kind laughter. It was mocking, mean laughter that made Daniel's chest feel tight with anger. The bug-like Krell clicked their jaws in amusement. The glowing Lumerians dimmed their lights in what was their way of laughing. Even the normally polite species were smiling at the insults. Lisa Morgan stood next to Daniel in her military uniform. She commanded a human exploration ship called the Endeavor. For 5 years she had traveled space, met new species, and proved that humans were capable. But none of that seemed to matter now. Her hands formed into fists at her sides. The council overseer was a tall alien named Korth. He looked down at Daniel from his high seat. His voice was cold when he spoke. He said that humans had asked for recognition 17 times in the past year. Every time the answer was no. Maybe it was time for humans to accept that they were not important enough. Daniel took a deep breath. Behind him, Jake Peterson shifted his weight. Jake was young and worked as security. His hand moved closer to his weapon, though Daniel knew he would never actually draw it. "Not here, not yet." Daniel spoke into his microphone. His voice was calm, even though he felt rage inside. He reminded the council that humans had shared important scientific discoveries. Humans had helped cure diseases for 4 different species. Humans had fought pirates and protected worlds when the council's own forces were too busy to help. All humans wanted was to be treated fairly and have a voice in decisions that affected them. More laughter came. This time, even species that had been quiet before joined in. The Vexari ambassador leaned forward. He said that human medicine was primitive. Human science was just rediscovering things the council had known for thousands of years. Human military victories were only against weak criminals, not real threats. He said humans were children pretending to be adults, and the council had been too patient with them already. Helen Price, another human officer, leaned close to Daniel and whispered. She said they should leave. This meeting was going nowhere and was only making things worse. Daniel nodded slowly. He looked around the big room one last time. He wanted to remember every face. The Krell with their clicking jaws, the Vexari with their contemptuous scales, the Lumerians blinking their lights in amusement. He would remember them all. Daniel spoke quietly into his microphone. He said the human delegation was withdrawing from the session. Then he turned and walked toward the exit. His team followed him. As they walked away, the laughter got louder behind them. Someone shouted something about humans running home to their primitive planet. Outside in the corridor, Daniel stopped. He pulled out a secure communicator and entered a special code. It was a code he had hoped never to use. Lisa asked what he was doing. Daniel said he was following Protocol 7. Helen's eyes went wide. She knew what that meant. Protocol 7 was the complete withdrawal protocol. It meant cutting all ties with the council. Daniel said he knew exactly what it meant. He was done asking for permission from people who would never respect them. He told Helen to send a message to Earth. All human personnel were to leave council space immediately. All diplomatic relationships were ended. All shared research would be taken back. All trade agreements were canceled. Jake asked about the Mutual Defense Pact. Daniel smiled, but it was a cold smile without warmth. He asked what defense pact. The council had just made it clear that humans were children playing at war. Let the council defend itself. Within 3 days, the withdrawal began. Helen coordinated everything from the council station. She was efficient and organized even as chaos erupted around her. The traders noticed first. At a big commercial station called Bargus, human merchants started packing up. Their cargo ships sat waiting as crews prepared to leave. The station administrator, an alien named Vel, watched in confusion. Vel approached Lisa as she supervised loading supplies onto the Endeavor. He said surely this was a misunderstanding. The trade contract still had 3 years left. Lisa didn't look up from her electronic pad. She said the contracts had a clause that allowed them to end if diplomatic relations broke down. Humans were using that clause. All penalties would be paid in full. Vel said that humans provided special computer cores that no one else supplied. What would the station do? Lisa said flatly that he should find another supplier. The Endeavor would leave in 8 hours. The same scene happened at dozens of stations across space. Human engineers packed their tools. Human doctors downloaded their personal files and deleted shared research. Human teachers resigned from their positions at the Galactic University. Jake supervised the evacuation of human security contractors from various council facilities. At one defense platform, a Krell commander tried to stop him. The Krell said Jake couldn't leave. The contracts were binding, Jake interrupted. He said the contracts were terminated immediately. The Krell government had received formal notice 2 days ago. All legal obligations were fulfilled. The Krell said there was a pirate threat in this sector. Jake said it was their problem now. After all, the council had said humans were just children playing at war, right? Back on Earth, Patricia Hayes was the director of global defense. She called an emergency meeting. The withdrawal of all humans from council space meant everything had to change. She asked Admiral Christopher Lane how many people were coming back. Lane said every single one. Ambassador Carter had been clear. Total withdrawal with no exceptions. They had sent 47 ships to collect people from the furthest stations. Someone asked about the research-sharing programs. Patricia said everything was terminated. Carter had invoked legal protections. Every piece of human research, every discovery, every innovation they had shared with the Council was now classified as secret. If the Council wanted to treat them like children, fine. The Council could develop their own solutions. Someone said this might seem petty. Patricia's face became hard. She said it wasn't petty. It was about respect and independence. The Council had made their position clear. Humans were simply accepting it and moving on. Back on the Council station, Overseer Korth finally realized something was wrong when his human assistant didn't show up for work. He found her office empty, her security access deactivated, and a formal resignation letter on his desk. He called an emergency meeting with other Council leaders. 20 species sent representatives, all looking confused. Korth announced that humans were leaving. All of them. Complete withdrawal from Council space. The Vixari representative laughed. He said good riddance. Let humans sulk in their corner of the galaxy. Korth said they didn't understand. Humans weren't just leaving. They were taking everything with them. Technology, research, trade agreements, security contracts, everything. The Vixari asked so what? They had never needed human contributions anyway. Korth asked if that was really true. He pulled up a display showing data. Humans had operated 40% of medical facilities on frontier worlds. They provided 70% of security forces in disputed areas. Their computer technology powered half the navigation systems. Their farming techniques fed 3 colony worlds. The room became quiet. Korth continued. It got worse. Humans had recalled all their research. Every medical database, every star chart, every scientific paper was now classified under human law. Species that had been using human-developed treatments suddenly couldn't access them anymore. The Krell representative clicked furiously. He said humans couldn't do this. Korth said they already had, and it was completely legal. He had reviewed all the agreements. Humans had fulfilled every obligation before withdrawing. There was nothing the Council could do. On the Endeavor, as it made its final jump out of Council space, Lisa stood on the bridge and watched the stars. Her crew worked quietly and professionally, but she could sense their anger. Her first officer, Greg Phillips, asked if she thought the Council would realize their mistake. Lisa replied that eventually they would. But by then it would be too late. Humans had given the Council respect, cooperation, and friendship. The Council had given them contempt. Now the Council would learn what humans were actually worth. The Endeavor's engines flared bright, and the ship vanished into faster-than-light travel, heading home. Behind them, dozens of other human vessels did the same. It was a silent exodus that would change the galaxy forever. Daniel Carter sat in his quarters on the transport ship, taking him back to Earth. He looked out at the passing stars and felt no regret. The Council had laughed at them, called them primitive, treated them like servants who should be grateful for scraps. Now the Council would learn what it meant to lose humanity's partnership. And when they came asking for humans to return, if they came asking, it would be on humanity's terms, not as subordinates. not as servants, but as equals or not at all. Part 2, 3 months had passed since humans left council space. The problems were getting worse every day. On a colony world called Valoria Prime, Governor Tellus looked at the reports with growing horror. A plague was spreading through his people. Thousands were getting sick. The disease had a cure, but there was a problem. Humans had developed that cure 2 years ago and had given it freely to everyone. But now the human doctors were gone. The medical facilities they ran were closed, and the treatment information was locked away under human law. No one could access it anymore. Tellus asked his medical officer how many people were infected. The officer said 200,000, and the number was rising fast. Without the human treatment, they would have to use old methods. Many people would die. Tellus asked if they could recreate the human cure. The medical officer shook his head. It would take years of research. Humans had a unique way of understanding diseases that no one else fully understood. They had used human results without learning human methods. Now they were paying the price. Similar problems appeared across dozens of worlds. At the Terminus defense platform, where Jake Peterson had once commanded security, pirates attacked with boldness they had never shown before. The Krell defenders didn't have human tactical support or advanced sensors. They were overwhelmed in just a few hours. Hundreds died. The station was looted and destroyed. Administrator Vell watched his station die slowly. Bargus Station had been a thriving hub of commerce. Now, without human quantum cores, half the systems ran on backup power. Ships couldn't navigate properly. Trade slowed to almost nothing. Within weeks, merchants started leaving for other stations. Bargus was becoming a ghost town. The Galactic University faced its own crisis. Professor Quellen was a famous physics teacher. He stood before his class and tried to explain complex concepts, but he couldn't use the teaching methods that made everything clear and understandable. A student asked why he wasn't using the Miller equations anymore. Last semester, those equations made everything so much easier to understand. Quellen's light flickered with frustration. He explained that Dr. Ethan Miller had published those equations through human research channels. When humanity left the council, they took their intellectual property with them. Using those equations now without permission was illegal. The student protested. They had been using human research for years. Quellen said bitterly that they had used it under a cooperation agreement. Humans had followed that agreement perfectly until the council insulted them. Now everyone was paying the price for that arrogance. On Earth, Daniel sat in a meeting room with Patricia and Admiral Lane. They were reviewing intelligence reports from across the galaxy. Patricia said the frontier worlds were in chaos. Epidemics, pirate attacks, economic collapse. They were begging for help. Daniel asked what Earth's response was. Lane said they were watching the situation but not intervening. That was what Protocol 7 required. Some government officials wanted to offer humanitarian aid. Daniel said humanitarian aid required the council to acknowledge they needed humans. He asked if they had. Patricia checked her notes. The council had sent 17 formal requests for talks, but they were all worded as asking humans to reconsider or inviting humans to resume cooperation. None admitted they were wrong. None apologized. Daniel nodded. Then they would wait. The people suffering deserved help, but the council needed to learn this lesson. Humans weren't a charity for those who disrespected them. Patricia said quietly that some people were calling humans cruel. Daniel replied that the council had called humans primitive children. Humans were simply accepting that assessment. If they were too primitive to have a voice in decisions, surely their primitive help wasn't valuable either. Back in council space, Korth called another emergency session. The mood was completely different now. No laughter, no contempt, just growing desperation. Korth announced that the Valoria situation was getting worse. 17 other worlds were reporting similar medical crises. The attack on Terminus had encouraged pirates throughout the frontier. Bargus Station would completely collapse within 6 months. Research institutions were facing knowledge gaps they couldn't bridge quickly. The Krell representative suggested demanding that humans honor their obligations. but his voice lacked confidence now. Korth said wearily that humans had fulfilled every legal obligation before leaving. Legal advisors had reviewed every agreement. Humanity had violated nothing. The Council had simply never considered that humans would actually leave. The Vexari ambassador suggested forcing humans to return. Korth asked how. Military action against a species they had claimed was primitive and weak? If they admitted humans were a threat, they admitted they were wrong. If they tried force and failed, they would look even worse. And if they somehow succeeded, humans would never cooperate genuinely again. The Zenthari ambassador had been quiet until now. She spoke softly. She said she had visited Barga Station last week. The human departure had destroyed more than trade. Humans had been the connective tissue holding the frontier economy together. They were everywhere, doing jobs others considered beneath them, solving problems others didn't think were important. They were the invisible foundation no one noticed until it was gone. The Lumerian representative added that humans had been merchants, security guards, technicians, and teachers. The Council had thought of them as simple service providers. They never realized humans were essential. Someone asked what they should do. Korth looked around the room. 200 species had representatives here, and now all of them understood their mistake. They had to do what they should have done from the beginning, apologize genuinely, and hope humans would listen. Lisa received a message while on New Seattle, a human colony. It was a coded transmission from Earth. She read it twice before calling her senior officers. She told them the Council wanted to negotiate. Greg asked what humans were offering. Lisa smiled thinly. Nothing. They were listening. That was a big difference. The message from the Council came through private channels, not official ones. That detail told Daniel everything. It came from Korth personally. Korth's message said he was writing not as an overseer but as one leader to another. The Council was wrong. He was wrong. They had let prejudice and arrogance blind them to humanity's value. The consequences had been catastrophic, but deserved. He was asking, not demanding, would Daniel be willing to meet? No council chambers, no formal proceedings. Just a conversation between two people trying to fix a terrible mistake. Daniel read it 3 times before sharing it with Patricia and Lane. They had a virtual meeting within the hour. Lane said immediately it was a trap. Patricia disagreed. Korth going around official channels was significant. He was risking his position by doing this. Daniel said he had dealt with Korth for 3 years. Korth wasn't cruel, just comfortable with how things were. He had genuinely believed the Council's way was the only way. This message suggested he had learned otherwise. Patricia asked if Daniel wanted to meet him. Daniel corrected her. He wanted to hear what Korth had to say. But not alone and not on Council terms. If Korth wanted to talk, he had to come to humans. Neutral territory, Saturn Station, human security, human rules. 1 week later, Korth arrived at Saturn Station. He brought only 2 assistants, no guards, no show of force. Daniel met him in a simple conference room with Lisa and Jake. Korth looked different. The confident, towering alien who had once looked down on humanity now seemed smaller, his posture almost apologetic. Korth began to speak. He said he had practiced a speech with formal diplomatic words. But they all felt hollow, so he would speak plainly. The Council was wrong about humanity. He was wrong about humanity. Because of their arrogance, thousands were suffering. Daniel said nothing, just waited. Korth continued. The Valoria plague had killed 40,000 people. The frontier worlds were in chaos. The economy was shrinking. Research institutions were stuck. All because they lost something they never valued until it was gone. They lost humanity's partnership. Daniel said quietly that they didn't lose it. They threw it away. They laughed at humans, called them primitive children, told them to accept their inferior place. Korth said simply, yes. They did. And they were fools. Lisa leaned forward. Why should humans care? The Council made their position clear. Humans were just accepting it. Korth replied that the people dying on Valoria weren't in that Council chamber. The families being raided by pirates weren't the ones who laughed. The students who couldn't learn weren't the ones who called humans primitive. He knew humanity had no obligation to help, but he was asking anyway, not for the council, but for innocent people suffering because of council mistakes. Jake spoke, his voice hard. Did Korth understand that if humans helped now, things wouldn't go back to how they were? Humans weren't convenient support staff anymore. Korth said he understood. The council was prepared to offer humanity a permanent seat on the security directorate, full voting rights, equal voice in all major decisions. Daniel heard Patricia's voice through his earpiece. She was monitoring remotely. She said the council seat was a start, but not enough. Daniel nodded. The seat was appreciated but insufficient. Here were humanity's terms. First, all human research and intellectual property remained under human control. The council wanted access. Part 3, 8 months after humanity returned to council space. Everything looked the same but felt completely different. The council chamber was the same building, but the power structure had changed forever. Daniel sat at the high table now, not down below where petitioners stood. The human delegation had a position equal to the founding members of the council. It was a visible symbol that humans were no longer asking for permission. They were equals now. Admiral Lisa Morgan sat beside him. She had been promoted and now served as humanity's military representative to the council. The promotion reflected how seriously Earth took its new position. Overseer Korth opened the session. He said they were gathered to officially approve the treaty between humanity and the council. This treaty recognized what should have been obvious from the start. Humanity was an equal partner in galactic affairs, bringing unique perspectives and capabilities that made everyone stronger. The Vexari delegation sat in angry silence. They had fought against every part of humanity's return, but they didn't have enough votes to stop it. Too many council members had experienced firsthand what happened when humans left. Korth continued talking about the Valoria situation. Human medical teams had not only cured the plague, but trained local doctors in the treatment methods. 300,000 lives were saved. Dr. Karen White sat in the gallery and allowed herself a small smile. She had led the medical mission to Valoria. The work had been exhausting, with 20-hour days and constant pressure, but it was worth it. The Zenthari governor had cried when she told him the epidemic was over. Admiral Lane reported from Earth through a hologram. Frontier defense had been completely restructured. Humanity had established 5 joint security stations with council forces. These stations were commanded by officers from both human and council militaries, working as true equals. Pirate activity had dropped by 70%. Jake Peterson now commanded one of those stations. He had sent a message that morning saying the Krell soldiers were professional and respectful. It helped that humans had saved their lives last week when raiders attacked. Nothing built friendship like fighting together. Administrator Vell gave a report on economic integration. Bargus Station had not only recovered but was now more prosperous than before. Human merchants had returned under the new framework. The establishment of fair trade agreements had actually increased overall commerce. When humanity left, the council realized how much their economy depended on human innovation and flexibility. The Zenthari ambassador stood up to speak. She said that 8 months ago her homeworld faced a crisis that human aid resolved. But more than that, humanity showed them what they had become: arrogant, comfortable, and blind to the contributions of those they thought were inferior. On behalf of her people, she offered a formal apology and gratitude to humanity. One by one, other delegates stood. The Lumarians, the Krell, even smaller species that had stayed neutral during the original conflict. Each acknowledged humanity's value and their own role in dismissing it. Finally, the Vexari ambassador stood. Daniel tensed, expecting more hostility. The Vexari began speaking. His scales shifted in patterns that Daniel had learned meant discomfort. He said that humanity had proven itself worthy of respect. His government acknowledged this. He paused, clearly struggling with the words. They were wrong. It wasn't a warm apology. The Vexari were too proud for that. But from such a proud species, it was significant. Daniel nodded to show he accepted it. Korth declared the treaty ratified. Humanity was now recognized as a full and equal member of the Galactic Council, with all rights and responsibilities. Applause filled the chamber. This time it was real applause, not mockery. The sound echoed off the high ceiling, and Daniel felt something release in his chest. They had done it. After the session ended, dozens of delegates approached Daniel. Everyone wanted to establish relationships with humanity now. They offered trade proposals, research partnerships, and cultural exchanges. The difference from 8 months ago was striking and somewhat ironic. Lisa asked quietly if Daniel felt vindicated. As they walked through the station corridors, Daniel said not vindicated, validated. There was a difference. Vindication would mean they were right and the council was wrong. Validation meant they had proven their worth through actions. They passed a viewing window where a human cargo ship was docking. Its hull displayed Earth's emblem alongside the council seal. Nearby, a mixed crew of humans and aliens worked together repairing a damaged vessel. Their cooperation looked easy and natural, like they had always worked this way. Lisa asked if Daniel thought this new respect would last. Daniel said it depended on humans as much as the council. They had to keep proving themselves, keep contributing, keep standing as equals. The moment they became comfortable or arrogant themselves, they risked becoming what the council had been. Jake arrived, having just come from his station for the ceremony. He said the Admiral and Ambassador should know that joint training exercises at Terminus went well. The Krell commander said he learned more in 3 days with human tactical simulations than in a year of traditional training. Lisa said that was because humans didn't assume they knew everything. They innovated, adapted, and improvised. It was what humans did naturally. Daniel added that it was what humans had always done. The council just never noticed because they weren't looking. They were too busy laughing to see what was right in front of them. On Earth, Patricia watched the ceremony broadcast. Admiral Lane stood beside her, shaking his head in amazement. Lane said that a year ago they were walking away from the galaxy. Now they were shaping its future, Patricia corrected him. They were always shaping the future. The council just didn't realize it. Every human merchant who found a better trade route. Every human doctor who saved a life. Every human engineer who fixed a problem no one else could solve. Humans were always essential. They just made everyone notice by leaving. Back on the council station, Daniel received a private message from Korth as celebrations continued around them. Korth wrote that he wanted Daniel to know something. Before humanity left, the council had been stuck. They had become too comfortable, assuming their way was the only way. Humanity's departure didn't just hurt economically or strategically. It hurt philosophically. It forced the council to question assumptions and recognize blind spots. Humans gave the council something it desperately needed: humility. For that, Korth was personally grateful. Daniel smiled as he wrote a reply. He said humanity hadn't tried to teach the council humility. They simply demanded respect. But if humility was a side effect, then perhaps some good came from the pain. Moving forward, they should build something better together. Not a hierarchy, but a true partnership of equals. Months turned into years. The partnership between humans and the council grew deeper and stronger. Human innovations in quantum computing changed how everyone traveled through space. Human medical techniques saved millions of lives across dozens of worlds. Human military tactics made the frontier safer than it had been in generations. But more important than any single achievement was the cultural change. New species joining the council were welcomed as equals now, not treated as subordinates. Different approaches were valued instead of mocked. The council chamber became a place of genuine cooperation rather than rigid hierarchy. Admiral Lisa Morgan commanded humanity's first fleet now. She stood on the bridge of the Endeavour and looked out at a mixed battle group. Human ships flew alongside Xanthari, Lumarian, and even Krell vessels. They moved in perfect coordination like they had trained together for years. Captain Greg Phillips was her executive officer now. Lisa asked him if he remembered when they left this space in anger. Greg said it was hard to forget. Lisa said they came back stronger. Not because they won a war or proved military superiority. They came back stronger because they proved they didn't need the council, but chose to partner anyway. That was real strength. The strength to walk away and the strength to return with dignity. On Earth, in a university classroom, Professor Daniel Carter addressed his students. He had retired from diplomatic service, but not from teaching. His students wanted to learn from someone who had lived through one of the most important events in human history. Daniel told his class that the council incident taught humanity a crucial lesson, not about others, but about themselves. They learned that respect wasn't given freely. It was earned through actions. They learned that their value wasn't determined by others' opinions but by what they actually did. And they learned that the strength to walk away was just as important as the strength to stand and fight. A student raised her hand. She said some historians called humanity's departure petty, that humans should have stayed and tried to change things from within. Daniel smiled at the question. He said some people probably thought that at the time. But here was the truth. They tried changing things from within for 3 years. They contributed, cooperated, and compromised. And they were laughed at for their efforts. Sometimes the most powerful statement was leaving with dignity and letting others experience the consequences of their choices. Humans didn't abandon the galaxy. They gave it the chance to realize what it was losing. That wasn't petty. That was strategic. In the council chambers, a new statue had been placed in the main hall. Part 4. The human medical ship, Mercy, entered orbit around Valoria Prime 6 weeks after the treaty was signed. Dr. Karen White stood on the bridge, looking down at the planet below. She could see the lights of cities, but she also knew that in many of those cities, people were dying from the plague. Karen had volunteered to lead this mission. She was 52 years old and had spent her entire career studying infectious diseases. When she heard about the Valoria plague, she knew she could help. But this mission was about more than medicine. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity kept its promises. Governor Tellus met them at the spaceport. He looked exhausted. His scales, normally a bright blue, were dull with stress and lack of sleep. When he saw Karen and her team, his eyes filled with tears. He thanked them for coming. He said 20,000 more people had died while they waited for help. His voice broke when he said it. Karen put a hand on his arm. She told him they were here now and would save everyone they could, but first they needed to understand the local situation. The plague might have mutated since humans last studied it. Over the next 3 days, Karen's team worked around the clock. They took samples, ran tests, and analyzed the data. The plague was worse than the original strain humans had cured. It had mutated twice, but the basic treatment protocol would still work with some modifications. Karen called a meeting with Tellus and his medical staff. She explained what they needed to do. First, immediate treatment for the critically ill. Second, vaccination for the healthy population. Third, training for local doctors so they could continue the work after humans left. A Zenthari doctor asked why they were sharing the training. Wouldn't it be more profitable to keep the treatment secret and sell it? Karen looked at him like he had said something strange. She said that medicine wasn't about profit. It was about saving lives. Besides, humanity had learned something important. Real strength came from lifting others up, not keeping them dependent. The work was brutal. Karen and her team worked 18-hour days. They set up treatment centers in 5 major cities. They trained 200 local doctors. They vaccinated 500,000 people in the first month. Karen saw horrible things. Children dying because the plague had spread too far before treatment. Parents weeping over lost children. Entire families wiped out. But she also saw hope. Patients recovering, communities coming together, local doctors learning and taking pride in their new skills. One night, exhausted and unable to sleep, Karen sat in her quarters writing in her journal. She wrote about a little Zenthari girl named Pella, who had been near death. Karen had spent 6 hours treating her personally. This morning, Pella smiled and asked for food. That smile made everything worth it. Governor Tellus visited the human medical ship after 2 months. The epidemic was under control now. Death rates had dropped to almost nothing. The vaccination program was working. Local doctors were handling new cases confidently. Tellus thanked Karen again. But this time his gratitude went deeper. He said humans had not only saved lives, they had restored faith. For so long, the frontier worlds felt forgotten by the Council. When the plague hit, they asked for help, and the Council said wait. Resources were limited. Other priorities existed. But humanity came immediately. Humanity didn't calculate profit or political advantage. Humanity just helped. That meant more than medicine. It meant hope that the galaxy could be better. Karen felt tears in her own eyes. She said that was what humanity wanted. Not dominance or control, just a galaxy where everyone helped each other, where being strong meant protecting the weak, not exploiting them. Meanwhile, at Terminus Station, Jake Peterson was fighting a different kind of battle. The station had been rebuilt after the pirate attack. But now it was a joint human-Krell operation. And that meant dealing with cultural differences. The Krell were warriors by nature. They respected strength and direct action. They thought human tactics were too cautious, too focused on minimizing casualties. Real warriors accepted losses as inevitable. Jake disagreed completely. Every soldier under his command was a person with family, dreams, and value. Throwing lives away wasn't brave. It was stupid. The tension came to a head during a pirate raid. Sensors detected 3 pirate ships approaching a nearby mining colony. The Krell commander, Thex, wanted to charge in immediately with all ships. Overwhelming force. Quick victory, Jake said no. They should scout first, understand the enemy strength, and then plan an approach that maximized success while minimizing risk. Thex clicked his mandibles in frustration. That was the human way. Slow, careful. While they planned, innocents died. Jake stayed calm. He pulled up tactical displays and showed Thex something. In the last year, stations using human tactics had 70% fewer casualties than those using traditional methods. Same success rate, fewer deaths. Thex studied the data. Jake could see him thinking, reconsidering his assumptions. Jake said they could win this fight and all go home alive. Wasn't that better than winning with half the force dead? Thex finally agreed to try it Jake's way. They approached the colony carefully using sensors to map pirate positions. Jake identified that 2 pirate ships were old models with weak rear shields. The third was newer and dangerous. The plan was simple. 1 human ship and 1 Krell ship would approach from angles that forced the pirates to expose their weak rear shields. The other ships would wait in reserve, ready to help if needed. It worked perfectly. The pirates never expected such a coordinated approach. Within 30 minutes, all 3 pirate ships were disabled with 0 friendly casualties. The colony was saved. After the battle, Thex approached Jake. He said that perhaps human methods had value. He had lost many friends over the years in battles they won. Maybe it was time to learn a new way. Jake smiled and said they could teach each other. Humans could learn Krell courage and directness. Krell could learn human planning and precision. Together, they would be stronger than either alone. Over the following months, Terminus became a model for human council cooperation. Human and Krell soldiers trained together, ate together, and became friends. They learned each other's languages and customs. When someone suggested separating the human and Krell quarters, both groups refused. They were one unit now. Back on Earth, Patricia and Admiral Lane were dealing with a different problem. Some human politicians wanted to take advantage of humanity's new position. They proposed using the council seat to push aggressive trade policies that favored Earth. Patricia called a meeting with these politicians. She listened to their proposals, then shook her head. She reminded them why humanity had left the council in the first place. The council had been arrogant and exploitative. If humanity acted the same way now, they would become what they had fought against. One politician argued that they had earned the right to push their advantage. They had suffered insults and proven their worth. Admiral Lane spoke up. He said the politician was missing the point. Humanity's strength wasn't in dominating others. It was in building genuine partnerships. The moment they started acting like the old council, they would lose everything they gained. Patricia added that the galaxy was watching. New species considering joining the council were looking at how humanity used its power. If humans were fair and cooperative, those species would trust the council. If humans were exploitative, they would stay away and the council would grow weaker. The politicians eventually agreed, though some looked unhappy about it. Patricia understood their frustration. It was tempting to use power when you had it. But real leadership meant restraint. At the Galactic University, Professor Quellen was teaching again. But now he had human co-teachers. Dr. Nathan Perry worked with him to teach physics using both Lumarian and human methods. The combination was powerful. Lumarian methods emphasized intuitive understanding through light patterns and energy flows. Human methods used mathematical frameworks and step-by-step logic. Students learned faster and understood deeper using both approaches together. Quellen admitted to Nathan one day that he felt ashamed. He had taught physics for 40 years using only Lumarian methods. He thought it was the best way, the only real way. Now he saw how limited that view was. Nathan said gently that everyone had blind spots. The important thing was learning from mistakes. Quellen was doing that. He was showing his students that true wisdom meant being open to new ideas. They stood together looking at a class full of students from a dozen species. Human Lumerians, Anthari, Krell, Vexari, and others all learning together, all teaching each other. Nathan said this was what the galaxy should be. Not one species dominating or one method being supreme, but everyone contributing, everyone learning, everyone growing together. Quellen's light pulsed in agreement. He said the council incident had been painful but necessary, like setting a broken bone. It hurt, but it healed stronger. On the Endeavor, Lisa reviewed reports from across human operations in council space, medical missions, security partnerships, trade negotiations, research collaborations. Everywhere humans worked with council species, the pattern was the same. Initial skepticism, then growing respect, then genuine partnership. Greg asked if she was satisfied with how things turned out. Lisa thought about it. She said satisfied wasn't the right word. Hopeful was better. They had proven that respect could be earned and that Part 5, 20 years had passed since the day humanity walked out of the council chamber. Daniel Carter was 70 now, his hair completely white, his face lined with age, but his eyes were still sharp, still alert. He had lived to see everything he fought for become reality. Today was his last day at the council station. He was retiring completely, going home to Earth to spend time with his grandchildren. But before he left, he wanted to see how much had changed. He walked through the corridors slowly, not because he was weak, but because he wanted to remember everything. The station was so different now. 20 years ago, humans had been rare here. Now they were everywhere. Human merchants, human students, human workers, mixing naturally with dozens of alien species. He passed a cafe where a human woman sat with a Krell, laughing over something on a datapad. He passed a repair shop where a Zenthari mechanic worked alongside a human apprentice. He passed a classroom where children of 6 different species learned together. This was normal now. Humans weren't special or unusual. They were just part of the fabric of galactic society. That was exactly what Daniel had wanted. Lisa met him in the main plaza. She was an admiral now, commanding significant forces, but she had taken time from her duties to walk with Daniel one last time. She asked how he felt. Daniel said he felt old, but happy. They had built something good here, something that would last beyond them. They walked together toward the council chamber. Daniel wanted to see it one more time. The place where everything had changed, where he had been laughed at, where he had walked away, where he had eventually returned to claim humanity's rightful place. The chamber was in session. They stood in the gallery watching the proceedings below. A new species was being welcomed into the council, the Tirani, a small species from a distant sector. Daniel watched how they were treated. The council members were respectful. They asked questions about Tirani culture and needs. They listened to the answers carefully. They made genuine offers of assistance and partnership. There was no condescension, no mockery, no hierarchy. The Tirani ambassador looked nervous but hopeful. She thanked the council for the welcome. She said her people had heard stories about the council, some good, some concerning, but recent changes had convinced them to apply for membership. Overseer Korth, still in his position but also nearing retirement, smiled warmly. He said the council had learned important lessons about humility and respect. Every species brought unique value. The council's job was to help each species thrive, not force them to fit into predetermined roles. Daniel felt Lisa squeeze his arm. She whispered that this was what they fought for. Daniel nodded. Words alone didn't matter. Actions did. And the council's actions toward the Tirani proved that real change had happened. After the session ended, Korth found them in the gallery. The old Drexian moved more slowly now, his scales less vibrant, but his mind was still sharp. He greeted Daniel and Lisa warmly. He said he heard this was Daniel's last day. Daniel confirmed it. He was going home. His work here was done. Korth said Daniel's work would never be done. The changes he started would continue forever. Every time a species was welcomed with respect instead of contempt, that was Daniel's legacy. Daniel smiled. He said it wasn't just his legacy. It belonged to everyone who had fought for change. The humans who had walked away with dignity. The council members like Korth who had the courage to admit mistakes. The people throughout the galaxy who chose cooperation over dominance. They walked together through the station, three old colleagues remembering decades of history. Korth talked about his own retirement plans. He wanted to write a book about the council incident, not a dry historical record, but an honest account of failure and redemption. Daniel said he would read that book. It was important for future generations to understand what happened and why. The good and the bad. The mistakes and the corrections. Lisa mentioned that human academies now taught the council incident as a case study in diplomacy. Students learned about standing firm on principles, about knowing when to leave, about coming back with dignity, about using power responsibly. Korth said council academies taught the same incident from the other side, about the dangers of arrogance, about recognizing value in unexpected places, about the cost of disrespect. Daniel said perhaps that was the most important lesson. Everyone needed to learn it from all sides. Understanding came from seeing multiple perspectives. They reached the docking bay where Daniel's transport waited. Karen White was there, along with Jake Peterson, Greg Phillips, and dozens of others who had worked with Daniel over the years. Humans and aliens mixed together naturally in the crowd. Karen hugged Daniel. She said Valoria had invited her to become an honorary citizen. The planet now had one of the most advanced medical systems in the galaxy, built on the foundation she had helped establish. Jake reported that Terminus Station hadn't seen a major pirate attack in 5 years. The Joint Human Council defense was too effective. Pirates avoided the area entirely now. Greg mentioned that the Endeavor was being retired to a museum on Earth. The ship that had left Council space in anger would now teach future generations about courage and dignity. Daniel listened to all of them and felt profound satisfaction. These were the people who had made everything possible. They had believed in him when he made the hard choice to leave. They had supported the decision to return. They had built the partnerships that changed the galaxy. He gave a short speech. He thanked them for their service and dedication. He reminded them that respect was earned every day through actions, not preserved through past glory. He told them to keep building bridges, keep forging partnerships, keep showing the galaxy what humanity could be. As his transport lifted off, Daniel looked down at the station growing smaller below. He thought about that day 20 years ago when he had walked out of the council chamber. The laughter following him, the rage burning in his chest, the decision to invoke Protocol 7. At the time, some people thought he was making a mistake, that walking away meant giving up, that humanity would be isolated and forgotten. But Daniel had understood something crucial. Sometimes you had to walk away to show others what they were losing. Sometimes absence spoke louder than presence. Sometimes the only way to earn respect was to stop begging for it and start demanding it through action. The gamble had worked. Not immediately, not easily. But it had worked. Now, 20 years later, humanity stood as equals in the galactic community. Not because they conquered anyone. Not because they were superior. But because they proved their worth and refused to accept anything less than respect. The transport entered faster than light travel. The stars blurred past the window. Daniel closed his eyes and let himself relax for the first time in decades. On Earth, his daughter waited with his grandchildren. They wanted to hear stories about his adventures. About aliens and spaceships and diplomatic incidents. He would tell them everything. The good and the bad. The victories and the struggles. But most importantly, he would teach them the lesson he learned. That respect was earned through character and action. That walking away from disrespect was strength, not weakness. That coming back on your own terms was victory, not surrender. His granddaughter Emma was 12 years old and wanted to be an ambassador like him. His grandson Kyle was 15 and wanted to join the Space Navy. Both of them had grown up in a galaxy where humans were respected and valued. They couldn't imagine the old days when humans were dismissed and mocked. Daniel would make sure they understood, not to make them bitter or angry, but to help them appreciate what they had and to teach them to protect it. Every generation had to earn respect anew. It couldn't be inherited or assumed. Back on the council station, Lisa stood at the viewport watching Daniel's transport disappear into the distance. Greg stood beside her. He asked if she would miss working with Daniel. Lisa said of course. But Daniel had taught her well. She knew what to do. Keep pushing for equality. Keep building partnerships. Keep proving that humanity's strength came from lifting others up, not pushing them down. A message came through on her communicator. It was from a frontier world requesting human assistance with a technology problem. The local population needed help designing better water purification systems. Lisa smiled. This was the work now. Not grand diplomatic gestures, just steady, consistent help. Building relationships one interaction at a time. She assigned a team to help with the water systems. She made a note to check in personally next month. Small things mattered. Every positive interaction built trust. Every display of genuine help reinforced that humanity was a true partner. At the Galactic University, Nathan was giving his final lecture of the semester. His classroom was packed with students from 20 different species. He talked about quantum mechanics, but he also talked about learning and cooperation. He told his students that knowledge belonged to everyone. Hoarding it made you weak. Sharing it made you strong. The old council had tried to hoard knowledge, using it to maintain hierarchy. The new council shared knowledge freely, and everyone benefited. A Vexari student asked a challenging question. He said some Vexari still believed the old ways were better. That strength came from dominance. How did you change minds like that? Nathan thought carefully before answering. He said you couldn't force,